All right, here we go. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello, hello. Good afternoon and evening, Indonesia. Good morning, Dublin, Ireland. Good day for our friends from all the rest of the world. It must be evening and night in Pacific, Australia, New Zealand, afternoon and evening in Asia, morning now in Europe and Africa, early morning in North America, Central America, and South America. First and foremost, thank you everyone for coming. Welcome to this international webinar that is attended by participants from 65 countries of 6 continents around the globe. We are gathering now this day, all nations, citizens of the world, to be united for helping the people against blindness. Welcome to our 18th episode of Distinguished Maestro Lecture. I am Gede Pardianto from Indonesia, and let's start the webinar. To honor our origin country of this webinar, please pay attention to Indonesian National Anthem. Thank you very much. Also, to honor the origin country of our distinguished speaker, please pay attention to Irish National Anthem. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, this great maestro this time will be Dr. Arthur Cummings, a legend, a grandmaster, friend of mine, the man, a leader of Europe, multiple awards winning, a great surgeon. Professor Cummings is a cataract and refractive surgeon at the Wellington Eye Clinic in Dublin, Ireland. Arthur is participating in clinical studies and serving on the medical advisory board of numerous ophthalmic companies. He is past president of American European Congress of Ophthalmic Surgery, Chapter Europe. He is Global Ambassador of the Refractive Surgery Alliance. In 2018, 2019, and 2020, he was ranked in the top 100 most influential ophthalmologists worldwide by the Ophthalmologist. He has received multiple awards from American Academy of Ophthalmology, International Society of Refractive Surgery, European Society of Cataract and Refractive Surgeons, American European Congress of Ophthalmic Surgery, Chapter Europe, and South African Society of Cataract and Refractive Surgeons. He served on board of directors of Alcon, and he also co-founder, trustee, and board member of World College of Refractive Surgery and Visual Science. He is co-chief medical editor of Cataract and Refractive Surgery Today and reviews for numerous journals. He authored the Wellington nomogram for wavelength excimer laser, and he has published more than 120 articles in peer-reviewed and trade journals, 12 books chapters, co-edited 2 textbooks, and delivered more than 450 lectures at international meetings. And now he is going to deliver the Maestro lecture to hundreds of participants from more than 65 countries of 6 continents around the world. Wow, that is so astonishing. At this very moment, he will present a very important topic with the title, Establishing the World College of Refractive Surgery and the Use of Artificial Intelligence in Cataract and Refractive Surgery. It will be a really interesting topic. Now, we are learning from the man who is a grandmaster on this. So be prepared. Fellow ophthalmologists, let's pay attention to Professor Arthur Cummings. So Arthur, we are counting down for you. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Time is yours. Lift off. Godspeed, Arthur Cummings.
Gede, thank you so much. That's such a warm introduction and such a warm feeling that you've created. And I've never seen a meeting start with the national anthems of the participants involved. That's such a nice touch. Very, very good. I've heard good things about this lecture series, and I hope to do my bit to continue the training and the discussion and the thought process. So I really appreciate the invitation. And as I said to you earlier, you know, we don't often get time to speak about a topic at length. We normally have to condense it into something very short. So I'm going to do this in an hour. And when you first invited me, I thought that the use of AI in cataract and refractive surgery was a good topic. But I just felt that for a whole hour that maybe it would be missing something. And something very close to my heart is the World College of Refractive Surgery. And I challenged myself with the thought process of how do we bring those two together? And in fact, it is a really good exercise because you can bring those two together. So I'm going to share with you my thoughts. So I want to start with a comment that was published on the BBC some time ago. There are more people alive today than have ever died. That's quite an astonishing comment. There are more people alive today on Earth, 7.7 billion, than have ever died. So I found it very interesting, and I went and looked and read more about it, and it turns out it's not exactly true, but it's not very far from the truth. But it still tells you how many people are living on Earth today. And you can see where we're going with that. We've got a big problem, a big burden to deal with in the future. So my financial disclosures, I'm on the medical advisory boards of Alcon, Vivio, and Wavelight that are mentioned in this talk today. It's not about the companies today. This is about how we see the future of ophthalmology. And then I'm on the board of directors of Alcon and on the board of directors of the World College. So I want to start off with this image, and I'm going to end with not this image, but with this thought process. And why I've chosen aviation is something which just 60 years ago was nothing like it is today. And things happened in the aviation industry that made it what it is today. And today we have this conversation over Zoom, But other times we jump on a plane without thinking and we fly and meet one another wherever it's going to be. So what's made aviation so successful? Well, the first thing is that safety, safety, safety. We don't even look up from our seat when we're taking off. It's so safe on the plane now. This issue of black box thinking, and if there's one book you want to read this year sometime, it's this Black Box Thinking. It's a wonderful book about how the aviation industry has a black box on their planes, not because they want to try and identify who's to blame. They want to find out what happened that led to the disaster and prevent it in the future. And if you just think about our own industry, is often we celebrate people who are brave enough to share a complication because it's so rare. Black box thinking is a very nice way of looking at healthcare. Aviation created an ecosystem with lots of systems in place. There was a lot of standardization. Training is paramount, and simulators are part of the training. And this is a publication from 2016, where in the year 2015, there was not one fatal jetliner accident occurred across the globe. Now, can you imagine if we start taking vision correction surgery to that level of safety, how it would grow? So I'm going to speak just generally about artificial intelligence first in terms of screening tools, diagnostic tools, planning tools, laser vision correction, something about RL power calculations, and then RL design selection and selecting a refractive target. So screening tools, if we look at a pentacam like this, we're very happy. We want to go ahead and do a LASIK. And the next thing we notice is, thanks to the Beal-Ambrosio display, that is coming up with a warning saying you've got to be careful about this. You've got to think about this. That's all artificial intelligence. And we could then have the opportunity to go look at an epithelial map. An epithelial map might say, well, in this case, don't worry, the epithelium looks okay. But again, it's making projections over what it believes the risk is. And these are all based on facts, data, and then extrapolating with artificial intelligence. And I won't go into macula and the optic nerve with OCT, but everyone on this call is aware of how artificial intelligence and machine learning is playing a role in that space too. So what about the diagnostic tools? I want to share with you something called iSlit. This is from a colleague of mine called David Smudger in Israel, who's just very innovative and doing a lot of projects. And he had this idea that he'd like to spread eye care where there's no access to it by inserting the eye doctor input and knowledge into the slit lamp. So this is his team that are working on this. And basically, we know what the problems are. It's very long time to see an ophthalmologist. And often there's a misdiagnosis right at the start, and that just leads to a delay in the whole process. So if you look at this process of how a patient is seen and eventually treated, is if you could make the diagnosis on the slit lamp far more accurately, it's going to already put the person on a shorter path to recovery. And these are the companies that they recognized as being in the same sort of space of using AI to improve diagnostic performance. And I'm going to, in a moment, speak about Mikijaki as well. So this solution is an iPad that you attach to your slit lamp to give very, very rapid diagnoses, but it also looks at what the patient has said the complaints are. So the patient starts filling out the history form. In the database are 114 pathologies, 200 signs, 41 symptoms, a whole lot of risk factors. And this leads to the device knowing sort of what we're looking for. And then once you're on the slit lamp, the device will actually say to you, I think this is a corneal ulcer and probably staphylococcal, that type of thing. So using AI from a big database to help us make more accurate decisions. It makes faster access to consultations, reduces misdiagnosis, and optimizes the patient record. So very, very clever and really going to help where we don't have ophthalmologists. We know there's a global shortage of ophthalmologists, and they're working very closely with all the slit lamp manufacturers to have this an add-on that could be added. Mikijaki is a company in a similar space. And they also identified the fact that we have so many diagnostics today that it takes so much time and so much of our service to get people orientated, that wouldn't it be great if this could happen more quickly? So they're trying to solve a problem that's global, access to technologies, And the device is basically a robotic device that you can do on your own. You sit in front of the device, you don't need a tech, it's self-operating, and you sit behind the device, and within the space of 6 minutes, or 8 minutes if you want biometry included, it goes through 8 or 9 different devices, does the imaging, and then compiles a report. And again, prior to doing this, it starts with a chatbot, an AI-driven chatbot. And on some of the conditions, they have a 100% diagnostic success rate prior to doing the diagnostic tests, just based on the intelligence of the chatbot. And it's obviously telemedicine ready. So these are tools that really have the ability to expand what we can do. This is the core of the team that are driving that, Dr. Michael Asselin and Jackie Hochner. And then looking at planning tools, this also comes from David Smudge's laboratory, something called We Optimize. And there are quite a few people working in this space. Zeiss have a nice project, Alcon have a nice project called Smart Cataract. And it's just using devices and bringing them into one platform that can do all the work we currently do when we're trying to make a decision about how to treat a patient, or what lens to choose, or what lens power to choose. And it allows us to calculate, compare, and select easily. And what about reporting tools? Because we can't improve what we can't measure. So we have to measure things before we can treat them or improve them. So just on the clinical outcomes front, the 2 software programs I use, and that I'm very familiar with, are IBRA, internet-based refractive analysis from Zubisoft, and DataLink from SurgiVision. And they have the ability for us to really track outcomes and make publications simpler based off our database. They also have the ability to improve our nomograms. So you heard Gede say that I was involved with designing the Wellington nomogram. Well, that's a very good place to start for your first few cases. But once you start getting your own numbers, you want to track your own outcomes, because that's when you start getting power. So in a patient like this, we're planning a LASIK. The refraction's -525, -225. And what the device will tell us is we have a 3% risk of an enhancement on my database, 7% chance of losing 1 line of correction. It tells me what my residual stromal bed's going to be, my PTA. It shows me on this line above what the global database is on this laser for this refraction, and what needs to be entered to hit the target of what I want to achieve. And then it shows me mine specifically, and I can choose the data at 1 month or at 3 months. So it's really an accurate way of determining what I should use in terms of a nomogram. Now the AI part comes in, where I can simply choose the raw data, or I can use my own specific data rather than the global data. And that makes sense, because your specific way of doing the procedure, your environment that you're working in, differs from place to place. So it's, once you've got enough data, you want to use your own nomogram, and then you can use intelligent rounding if you need to round it up to the nearest quarter. And then you can also, if you want, to start using intelligent rounding in terms of age. So it knows the patient's age and sort of makes a decision to overcorrect a low myope. What about business intelligence? We've just recently started working with the company to see what that can do for the way we think about our practice. And it's only been a month, and in the space of a month, the findings have been startling. They've created dashboards for us that are updated hourly, and we can make the dashboards the way we want to make them. If the data is available, they can make it happen for us. So we're looking at appointments going forward, we're looking at revenue, we're looking at against targets, what we've set for ourselves, against previous year's data. And as I say, it's completely customizable. So the hallmark of this clinical and business intelligence is that we need to get good data. If you don't have good data, you're going to get, we know the story of garbage in, garbage out. This system has the ability to gather data from multiple systems, and instead of you having to go and seek a report, it's got a dashboard. You simply go to the dashboard and it tells you exactly where you are. So you can really, because it's hourly, if your data is entered quickly enough, you can have data on your lasers, results from yesterday on your list today, to know what the trends are with your laser. And then of course, machine learning can assist with patient categorization, can spot patterns in patients who tend to convert, those who don't, and we can look at trends and trends that may occur in the future again. So we first have to gather data, and the data has to be clean. We then need to prepare the data that they're categorized correctly, that the software knows how to analyze it. We then need to validate the data, and that will be against other systems we use perhaps. And then the report. And once we get to the stage where it's reported, you know that when you're looking at your dashboard, you're looking at validated and valid data. So patient classification, we can use this to help us identify key behaviors of patients that help us determine. One of the things that happened during COVID is we became a lot more focused. So in my clinic, we're probably seeing 20% less patient visits. We're seeing more new patients, but 20% less patient visits, but doing more surgery. So we've become a lot more effective. And this is what this program can do. It can help us determine where we can do more of our post-operative visits, because we don't tend to see problems at certain visits that we had aligned before, that we could skip them and do them virtually. So we're far fewer patients post-operatively in the clinic now, allowing us to see more new patients. And it hasn't changed patient satisfaction. Machine calibration, this Nathian product, can extract data from almost any device, not only our electronic health records, but from devices. It helps us with determining waiting lists, how we can best look at our waiting lists and where we need to apply focus. And AI can be applied to so many different parts of what we do: the administrative workflow, chatbots, precision medicine, robotic surgeries, virtual nursing assistants. So it's an area that's we're very excited about to see where this can go and how it can grow to make our practices better. So I'm going to go into a little bit more depth now just on how we currently use it, even if you don't know, and this is with laser vision correction and specifically ray tracing LASIK. So it's sort of 12 years ago we were involved with the study looking at ray tracing LASIK. And one of the facts I didn't know at that stage was that irrespective of how sophisticated our diagnostics might have been, whenever we planned a treatment, whether it was wavefront optimized, wavefront guided, topography guided, or custom Q, the laser always assumed that the eye we were treating was Goldstrand's model. So Goldstrand won the Nobel Prize more than 100 years ago for creating this model. And he said the average cornea is 43 diopters in steepness, and the average axial length is 24 millimeters. So what changed things for the thinking process was when the Landstar came along, and the Landstar biometer was licensed to Wavelight, and it was a different wavelength. The wavelength was at 820, which really saw the lens parameters well. And once the lens parameters could be well defined, if you had the wavefront, you had the refraction, you had the corneal topography, you could construct the shape of the lens and really have a virtual eye for that patient that was theirs and not the Goldstrand model. And now when the laser was planning a treatment, it could rather plan it on the virtual eye. So instead of using a refraction, an arbitrary refraction that has its own set of challenges, this is using a wavefront. And instead of assuming the cornea is 43, it's using 24,000 data points to determine the corneal shape. Additionally, the posterior cornea, the front of the lens, and the AC depth is now measured. And then using the Landstar, or the OB820, you now had the exact parameters on the central visual axis. So if you compared ray tracing to wavefront guided treatments are missing a number of assumptions. The ray tracing has tried its very best to measure those. And it has the potential then to line up with a result that's just a higher quality result. But just the AI part of it is, it also anticipated the expected biomechanical response and the epithelial healing response from the literature. So really taking us to a point where we can now start getting results that we haven't got before by taking away our limiting factors of the input data and the expected changes. So this was a multi-center trial some years ago, looking at patients more than -4 and with a lot of astigmatism. And we had 3 different devices providing tomography and pachymetry, the pentacam, biometry, and wavefront measurement. And the data was applied to an algorithm in Zurich, sent back to us, and the treatment was done on the Wavelight 400 or the 500. And the results were spectacular. I'm not going to go through them now, but I'll just go through the basics, and I want to show you comparative results. So the results were very good. What was very different about this was the fact that we did not use a nomogram. We couldn't change it. The moment we changed anything on the data we got, it reverted back to a wavefront optimized treatment. So we had to rely entirely on what the device was doing. And we started seeing results where we'd never seen patients measuring to 1.6, and yet 12% of patients were at 1.6 were uncorrected. Where preoperatively 1% were. And suddenly our efficacy graphs started looking like safety graphs almost. Safety was incredibly high in the 111 eyes, and stability was excellent. We're now seeing these patients 10 years later, and they remain stable. I've enhanced one of the 70 cases I did 11 years later, and about, the higher corrections. Patient satisfaction was very high. I could never in my practice emulate the results that were being achieved by the FDA. And until we did the ray tracing study. I mean, we went to the FDA data and specifically looked at patients more than -4. We saw that 80% with wavefront optimized were achieving 20/20. Over -7, 70% were. With wavefront guided, 91% were between -4 and -7. There weren't patients over -7 in the FDA studies. With ray tracing, 93% were. Basically, 90% were achieving 20/20, irrespective of their correction. So in my own practice, when I looked at data for patients with the same refractive range, with wavefront optimized, we find normally 15% gaining a line, 6% losing a line for this patient cohort. Wavefront guided, slight shift to the right, slightly improved. Custom Q, much like wavefront guided, slightly improved. Topography guided, before we had the skill sets we do now with Contura, not too impressive on an eye with a normal cornea. But ray tracing, in my cohort, not a single patient lost a line, and 73% gained one line and 2% gained 2 or more lines. And what I found intriguing about this was on the same laser, the same keratome, the same surgeon, the same everything. The only thing that differed here was the profile. So it really impressed me in what the power was over here. So no lines lost and 76.5% gaining a line. So the summary with ray tracing is these profiles are safe, they're very effective, they're predictable, and it certainly outperformed other profiles for treatments more than -4 diopters. This is now being rolled out in a controlled launch across the world. Maybe there's also an FDA study, and it's looking very promising. I'm very keen to see this become a product in the world. What about IOL power calculation? Because cataract surgery today is no longer just removing the cataract and putting a lens in. It's really about trying to make the person independent of spectacles afterwards. So I'm going to discuss just a few AI-based formulas. And the first one's the Rbf formula. So there are currently more than 20 different IOL power formulas out there. None are 100% accurate, as we know, and AI can help improve this accuracy. So Warren Hill's Rbf calculator was based on a project with Haag Streit and MathWorks, and it's the first commercial AI-based formula, and it's based for pattern recognition. It's only driven by data. It does not require prediction of ELP and divergence, and it was developed on 12,000 eyes measured on the lens star and implanted with the accuracy of IQ, and can calculate 2 eyes at the same time. So that was the first step. The next step is the Hoffer QST. We all know the Hoffer Q that we use for short eyes, but Savini and Tironi adding their input, now the Hoffer QST formula. What this formula does is 2 basic things. The Hoffer Q tended to overestimate the IOL power in eyes with shallow ACDs and underestimate it on eyes with deeper ACDs, like a high myope potentially. And also, it wasn't very good in terms of eyes longer than 26 millimeters, and the results tended to be hyperopic. So they made some improvements with machine learning and identified a few factors and adjustments for particular eyes. They can also calculate both eyes at the same time. They can do toric eyes. You can do post-refractive surgery eyes. And what they have found is a significant increase. Sorry, I've skipped too quickly, but a significant increase in their results using the AI additions to the Hoffer Q formula. The Kane formula, Jack Kane from Australia, a high volume surgeon, 30,000 eyes, and used the combination of theoretical optics, thin lens formulas, and big data. And in a 2020 study, independently, someone showed that the Kane formula was, at that point, the most accurate of all the formulas across all axial lengths. And again, can look at both eyes at the same time. And this is just time saving. It's great to see it when you're looking at a patients, just to make sure there's nothing that's going to be a surprise. Non-toric, toric, and keratoconus eyes. And Kane has been particularly useful with keratoconus eyes and also with toric eyes. Damon Gatineau is a PhD in clinical medicine, but also in mathematics. And he and his team have developed the Pearl DGS formula. And they've specifically used artificial intelligence and linear algorithms to improve outcomes. And they're using a hybrid thick lens formula, not a thin lens formula. And they have two algorithms that improve data like ELP, posterior corneal radii, and refractive index of various ocular segments. Their software tends to look at one eye at a time. It's very straightforward to use. And they also have a module for previous myopic LASIK. The Ladas Super Formula is possibly a formula that includes a lot of what the others have. And it can be optimized for a single surgeon, for multiple surgeons in a group, for surgeons in a library. It optimizes for 10 different ranges of axial length, for 10 different ranges of keratometry, for 10 different ranges of axial AC depth. So giving 1,000 points in a matrix for those variables, and then chooses the best formula for that specific combination. So of course, when you see this sort of data, you know it cannot be replaced with a single A constant. And the Vergence formula is a static, ray tracing will be static, but AI driven. And these combination AI driven formulas are evolving. They're continuously learning and becoming even better and better. So for a low volume surgeon, it helps because low volume surgeons are typically getting 65% of their patients within half an after, but it can push it to 95%. For medium volume surgeons, many medium volume surgeons are closer to the mid-70s, can push it to 95%. And the high volume surgeons who are currently, the best we're getting is 80% with our normal biometries, can push it to 95%. And all this does is it makes surgery more successful, creates a stronger word of mouth, and the less patients are unhappy or that you've got to go back and do some level of enhancement. So the Ladas Plus formula is Precision Ladas Universal Super Algorithm. It was independently analyzed by multiple ophthalmic companies, so not colleagues, but companies, and concluded that it's probably the most accurate of any of these methods. It uses AI to give the best IOL power and astigmatism correction. There are 3,000 plus users worldwide and thousands of IOL calculations daily, and works with all IOLs. It works with current technologies too. So in fact, even has some data for femtosecond laser users. We can put in lens equator input. It increases intraoperative aberrometry from 82 to 95%. And several input variables can be added. Can evolve and continue to learn and improve indefinitely. Incredibly, many of these formulae are including things like gender and age. I wouldn't have known that gender would have played a role in IOL calculations, and turns out it does. So the biometer of the future looks something like this. We do biometry, we add more data, we do the calculation, we then select the IOL power, we implant the lens, we then post-operatively do a wavefront refraction, and the post-operative outcome is then added to more data from learning, and algorithm optimization occurs, and the biometer becomes more intelligent. So closing this loop just makes this whole thing a self-calibrating smart biometer. And Ladas looks very similar, both eyes at the same time, gives you your lens of choice. It caters for whether you're targeting for plano or for any refractive target. Right, what about IOL design? So we've got a lot of tools today to choose the IOL power, but how do we choose refractive design? So just to show you a couple of things about what we know about our patients' needs. This is an article looking at viewing distances of handheld smartphones. What was found with these 129 subjects is there was a huge variation from patient to patient, and additionally for the patient themselves at what they do at different distances. So we can't assume what our patients need when they say, I read a lot and I work on a computer screen. We can't assume what their working distances are. And this was looking at the use of a smartphone over the space of an hour with young adults. And over the space of an hour, there was a huge variation in where the phone was held, depending on the app they were using or what they were doing. So again, at the moment, we underestimate our patients' near visual needs. We read up closer than we think, and this varies during the space of 60 minutes. Can you imagine today with people working from home and over the course of 8 hours on a computer, how they're changing their ergonomics? So how do we currently make a decision based on what lens style to use? So we know it's variable, people's needs are variable. We don't know exactly what they are. We make a lot of assumptions. We don't know their head position. We don't know the lighting of the environment they're working in. And then, just to confuse things even more, our world is designed for men in many respects. This book, Invisible Women, exposes data bias. And one example is just a seatbelt that they put in a motor car or a backpack. It will be designed. The people who would tend to use them and try them out are men, and that's it. There's the design, and women just have to adapt. And many things we do, we don't design with people's specific needs in mind. And you know, the world's changing in a different direction. Now look at the number of IOLs we have to choose. How do we make this choice when we don't even know what the patient's exact needs are? We know what they want, but we don't know what their needs are. So what can we do? We can have a lengthy interview. We can do a questionnaire. The one I use most is questionnaire, the Dell questionnaire, or we can have objective visual data. So an interview has stood the test of time, but it's subjective. Some patients are not great historians. Some doctors are not good listeners. It's time consuming. There's potential for misunderstanding, but it's better than just taking a wild guess. The questionnaires are more specific. And in fact, the part that's really helpful about the questionnaires is you can ask about personality types in a very nice way to try and figure out if someone's easygoing or really a perfectionist. But at the end of the day, nothing really beats objective data. And this is objective data collected over 36 hours. It's collected in the patient's home and their workspace, and it measures a lot more than an interview history or questionnaire can provide. So how does this work? All right. So this is wearing a device. It's made by a company called Viveo. And this device does visual behavior measurements, and it measures a personal defocus curve of working distances, of ambient lighting. So it will show us in this very quick little matrix of what time is spent at distance, what is spent at intermediate, what is spent at near, and across horizontally the photopic conditions, the head position, and then determines these defocus curves. And you can now see on the bottom is the dioptric range, and above is the distance range. So it objectively measures patient behavior, and on 1,000 different patients, you have 1,000 different defocus curves. And it measures this objective behavior, and it matches it to the performance properties of a range of IOLs to compare monofocals. So in this case, a monofocal would give you 45% without glasses. Wherever it's shaded is where you need help. Or a bifocal, you've got distance covered and near covered, but you need help intermediate. Or an extended depth of focus, where you're extending the reading range. Or something like a trifocal, where you expand the range even more. So what the device does is it takes the defocus curve, it then goes and matches it to a generic monofocal. And this includes every IOL with a published defocus curve, including mixing and matching, monovision, target offsets, and all the advanced technology lenses. And you can rank at what level of vision you want to compare this or look at this. And just for your information, almost all diffractive multifocal IOL studies are done at the 2025 level because this is regarded as being very, very functional. So it's just an interesting case study. You can see the data collected. You can switch off data for the weekend and use just the week. You can keep it all, whatever you want to do. The summary you've seen before, but just the overall defocus curve using all the data based on multiple hours now rather than a short conversation. But now the magic happens, the lifestyle match index. And now we see with the monofocal for this patient, they'd be out of glasses for 28% of their day, but need help for the rest of the day. And it now goes and does a ranking and looks at the lenses that are going to give, like almost like a Google ranking, which lens is going to best fit this defocus curve. In this case, a trifocal is adding 65% functionality, giving you a very good range of vision, and only weakest at a meter where you won't be 20/25 necessarily, but you'll be completely functional. The next best bet is it's showing me the Vivity, the non-diffractive extended depth of focus lens, is adding 58%. The Vivity or the regular monovision is adding 56% in this case at a -175 target. So it looks at all of these different lenses and combinations, and shows you in a scale towards the least effective, starting with the most effective down towards the least, what the difference is going to be. So it's very easy now for me to show a patient, if you choose blended vision with a monofocal lens, the costs are less. You can correct any issues you have with the pro glasses afterwards. And this is what it looks like. This is what you're going to get versus potentially what you get with a trifocal, and taking the considerations into place. But it gives you much, much better information based on the patient's specific needs on what your best options are. I want to show you this one just to show you why in the past, by just arbitrarily putting a lens in, we'd often be met with unhappy patients. So this particular patient, if they were given a restore, an Acrosoft restore, that was a very good lens for many people at 2.5. But for this patient, would only add 4% functionality, yet introduce the additional costs, the high expectations, and the dysphotopsia profile. So it's just a really good tool to educate people really well and make the best choice possible. So it's based on optimal visual data obtained remotely. It enhances patient satisfaction, especially when the owl and the patient are well suited and well matched. It strengthens word of mouth referrals, and it helps patients lead a more fulfilling life. So I think that's where I'm going to end this part of the talk on safety, objective data, AI, screening. That part's done. Our colleagues around the world are really working on this space to create us better tools. It's getting better all the time. So the stage is set, but where do we find the pilots? So if you think about my airline analogy again, the industry is being created. Safety is improving, the data is improving, the way we work is improving, but now we need pilots. And we're going to find these pilots. And this is where the College of Refractive Surgery comes in. So by 2050, the biggest cause of blindness is going to be macular complications of high myopia. That is remarkable. We expect there are going to be 10 billion people on the planet in 2050, of which 5 billion are going to be myopic, and 1 billion will have high myopia with the resultant pathologies that are associated, and it'll be the biggest cause of blindness. 133 million myopic eyes per year are going to enter the ocular maturity age group, over 18. So why do we need change? Dr. Michiel Critsen was my mentor when I trained in South Africa. I grew up in South Africa before coming to Ireland. And he taught me a lot of what I know about refractive surgery, but I really loved the way he thought about it. And he thought about the way it could be applied on a global basis. And in 1992, I was in one of my latter years of residency, and Professor John Marshall came and gave a talk in South Africa, and he showed this human hair and how an eczema laser had shaped this human hair. When I saw that photograph and I heard him speak, I thought, you know, this is what I want to do. The world has changed now. Our tools are improving. We have the ability to make people's lives better. And then Daniel Kahneman is a Nobel Prize winning behavioral economist, and probably the most cited economist in the world. And he published an article called Loss Aversion Theory. And it explains a lot of how refractive surgery fits into ophthalmology in general. And I want you just to be familiar with his work, Daniel Kahneman. And he just says, the pain of losses is twice as much as the pleasure of gains. And that sounds very academic. I'll give you a very, very quick example. Imagine you and I sitting across a table, and I say to you, listen, what's a really good sum of money that you can afford, but it's a good sum, you'd love to have it in your hands. And let's say for argument's sake, you said $1,000 for argument's sake. And I said to you, okay, let's flip a coin. And if it's heads, you pay me $1,000, but if it's tails, I pay you $1,000. No one participates. No one wants to play that game. All right. If it's heads, you pay me $1,000, but if it's tails, I pay you $2,000. Still no one wants to participate. Only once you get to 4 or 5-fold the gains do you start showing a willingness to participate. So now if we flip the coin and I lose, I pay you $5,000, but if you lose, you pay me $1,000. And that's a very good example of how we are more protective of avoiding loss than we are about achieving gain. Right, so this is in vision correction. Why do we need change? What's the scale of the problem? And I'm going to go through these topics. So something we tend to forget as ophthalmologists sometimes is that 60% of our brain in some ways dedicated to sight. And sight has 15 times the number of neurons than hearing does. And we know how powerful hearing is. I mean, it's hearing. Just think of a phone call, how much you can do on a phone call. If you look at the processing speed, is hearing and smell is 10 times faster than taste, the processing speed. Touch is 10 times faster than what hearing and smell is. And sight processing is 100 times faster. We as humans have been evolved. We've evolved to have sight, yet we're not always bearing that in mind. So look at the global burden of visual disability. This is from some years ago, 2011. The major cause of blindness and visual impairment in developing countries, and more than 90% of total disability in adjusted life years, are cataracts. By age 65, 90% will have some level of cataract, and between 75 and 85 would have lost vision from the cataract at 65. But look at the world population in 2010, look at the low vision and blind, and now I'll go and look in more detail at where the low vision is coming from. And you'll find that in a major percentage, it's cataract and uncorrected refractive error. And most people today are regarding cataract as a refractive procedure. So you want to try and get the person after the cataract surgery seeing and functioning as best as you possibly can. So uncorrected refractive error, 42%, cataract 33%. We're looking at 75% is in that space. Look at the number of people in 2010, 217 visually impaired, 253 rather, 55% women. Look at the growth in myopia, as we said a moment ago. Today, vision correction needs to include myopia prevention. We need to prevent the complications of a high myopia and treat patients before the time. Look at how myopia is impacting the developing world. 22 to 28 to 33% of people now with myopia, with 50% in 2050. There you are in 2050, 50%. Look at these people who can't see up close because they don't have reading glasses. 75% of visual impairment is avoidable. So in 2011, it was predicted to be 1.27 billion cases of presbyopia. In 2015, this was changed to 1.8. We now think it's 2.2 billion. Look at refractive errors globally not being corrected by spectacles, depending on where you are. So we always think when we hear this problem, just give them a pair of spectacles. So 2020 was earmarked as the year in which we'd help the world see better by giving spectacles all over the world. The problem has only grown bigger. It's not helped. And it hasn't helped because in many parts of the world, spectacles are stolen, they're broken, they stigma attached to them. People just don't wear them. We've got to find better solutions. So in developed economies, the savings are significant if you can help people see better. There's decreased risk versus contact lenses. There's lifestyle convenience, occupational fitness benefits of vision correction surgery. So 67 to 75% of the world go without refractive correction. Increased productivity yields massive returns on investment. The economic upside is in the trillions over 20 years. Look at the number of eyes that are going to be coming into the treatable range on an annual basis, 133 million. We're looking at a huge number of patients that need treatment. This publication from a year ago from The Lancet, 56 authors, I think, 349 references, the most intensive study on vision impairment as a global burden. Eye health is essential to achieve sustainable development goals. Vision needs to be reframed as a development issue. Almost everyone would experience impaired vision at some stage in their life. Eye health is an essential component of universal health coverage. In the EU, at the moment, hearing and sight isn't even part of sustainable aging. We're making that drive to say it has to be part of it. How can you consider aging gracefully and without seeing and hearing well? High quality eye care services are not universally delivered. We need to make it more deliverable. highly cost-effective vision restoring interventions offer enormous potential. Financial barriers are an issue. We need to address this. Technology and treatments have become so good now that we can apply them at scale. But the eye health workforce is unable to meet population needs in many countries. And we don't have reliable survey and service data in many parts of the world. And research has been crucial to advances in understanding and treating eye disease and solution-focused solutions. So what about so that's part of the scale of the problem. We have a massive problem ahead of us in terms of numbers. The digital tsunami, I've sort of addressed already with the AI part of things, but a tsunami in your part of the world, you're more familiar than I am in Ireland, but you know exactly what a tsunami is. But it's just a sense of being overwhelmed by quantities and amounts. So if you look at the assessment today with digital EMRs and all the devices we look at, once you've seen your 10th presbyope of the day, even though there are only an infinite number of solutions, the number of permutations you've got to consider for that particular patient, you get a headache. You just want to strangle one another. So AI and digital solutions are going to drive the way we think. Why I show this meeting over here? This was the first meeting that I'm aware of that was just about digital innovation. Guy Kazarian, Roger Zaldivar, Michael Moroccan, all leaders in this space. Rania Habash was at the meeting as a robot. You know, and this was in 2018, I think, 2017 maybe. So currently, ophthalmology is one of the most data-driven specialties. Digitalization plays a big role. You know that from formulas, from screening clinics, we know the role that it plays. But we have this overload. There's an information overload. There's just plain too much data. And we've got to try and make sense of this information overload. And this is where, just think about doing a toric IOL versus the way we used to mark and are doing it digitally. Think about the way we plan a refractive procedure. And so we're a bit like the gourmet chefs of ophthalmology in the refractive and cataract space. We've got to have good ingredients that are appropriate to their applications, that we prepare with expertise, and that we present in a way that's pleasing but functional. So in refractive terms specifically, our patient has all the raw data we need and information. We need to gather what we need from them in a controlled way, in a reliable, validated way. We need to process this with our skills and our expertise set, and then to deliver it in a way that meets their expectations. And bigger fields require better processing methods. So everything regarding AI, garbage in, garbage out, we need to sanitize data and make sure the data we're putting in is good. And if you don't sanitize the data, you might land up with horrible surprises. And that's the last thing we're looking for. Remember, we're looking to emulate what aviation has done. Yesterday, we'd go to the market and do something on a very personalized basis. Today already, we have devices that are automatically picking fruit for us and, you know, picking our fruit. They're taking those that are ready and not taking those that aren't ready, but it's still a slow, laborious process. Tomorrow, it looks like this. And tomorrow is basically, where it's happening at massive speed, and AI is taking what we need and what we don't need out of it for us. So we have this triangle that's starting to form between physicians, patients, and our tools, and how they work together. And these tools need to work together to have us be able to deliver a safer and better outcome, but also the patient understand more and have more say in how they want to be treated. So the digital future is smart assimilation of data, making better informed decisions, making those decisions simpler and easier based on more data, but making more personalized decisions at the end of the day. Now, what about our manpower challenge? There's first of all a shortage of ophthalmologists. There's a serious shortage of refractive fellowships. Patients in the refractive space are mostly private pay. Teaching hospitals typically don't offer refractive surgery. Young doctors aren't exposed to refractive surgery in their training. My son, who happened to take this thing off my cheek a week ago, this little lesion I had, he's in his 6th year of 7 of ophthalmic residency at 7 years in Ireland. He's a very accomplished ophthalmologist already. He knows close to nothing about refractive surgery. And he's not going to learn anything about refractive surgery. They have little knowledge of the field. But just a moment ago, we saw that years ago, uncorrected refractive error has been regarded by the World Health Organization, by other bodies that look at this, as the glaring need. What's the current perceived status of refractive surgeons? Well, they require minimal skills. It's just a gap filler between real jobs. It's not real surgery. Maybe it's money driven. And refractive surgery, really, it's a small side plate on the side dish of, it's a side plate on the dish of ophthalmology. Yet, if you speak to anyone who's a true refractive surgeon, they'll tell you it's a life-changing profession. It enhances people's lives. It changes their opportunities. You're a real doctor solving real-world problems. And I did a survey with ACOS a couple of years ago, and we looked at 100 people. What was 100? The percentage rather. And refractive surgery, 68% was self-taught. And of the younger people in the audience, 32% had done some kind of fellowship. How did we see the future looking? And almost all of us said, the best way to train is with a formal education. Let there be a curriculum that we know we're learning what other people are learning, like we do ophthalmology. But in the refractive space, we're learning and we know enough to go out and call ourselves a refractive surgeon. The other wasn't saying don't do it. The other was saying there are other means of doing online learning and this type of thing. So interesting comments were, there's no need for new surgeons to learn the hard way. Renato Ambrosio, I see a foremost aspect of education about refractive surgery is to our ophthalmic colleagues who don't do refractive, who don't get refractive. They need the education. And Dan Reinstein saying there should be a minimum 2 years training after a corneal fellowship. And Professor Zhang saying, I think refractive surgery should be part of our ophthalmology training program. We know that's not really going to happen. So the biggest need we have is in that space, and we don't have formal training for it. Dan Dury, who has trained more fellows than anyone I know, I'm saying, I totally support the whole idea of the College of Refractive Surgery. It'll take time and be controversial, but it'll be worth the effort. Right, what are the scenarios for refractive surgery training? We just continue as we are. We include it in formal medical school, or we do our own thing and do our own sort of apprenticeship. Right, what about refractive collaboration? So today, publications, many of them are featuring refractive surgery as a core part of their thinking, and that's getting exposure. They're allowing articles like this to be published before things happen because they like people to think about it. Should refractive surgery become its own specialty to an audience now of cataract surgeons? And you can imagine it could be a new thought process. The Refractive Surgery Alliance has been fundamental to the way refractive surgeons are thinking today. There are many, many good reasons to join the Refractive Surgery Alliance. It's a global organization with one benefit or one mission, bringing the benefits of refractive surgery to more people. It helps on a business focus with how we can do things more efficiently, physician leadership, and there's very unique meetings. There's a very active forum. There are economies of scale, provide visibility to the RSA membership. There's cross-generational exposure. There are educational opportunities, and the value is phenomenal. So the RSA has been leading the number of courses and webinars and seminars with the RSA are phenomenal. Right now, there are 1,000 residents globally attending the monthly resident series. This was at the World Ophthalmology Conference in 2018, starting to look and plant the seeds of the World College of Vision Correction Surgery being its own specialty. What about some developments? I'm not going to have much time. I'm going to go through very quickly. I spoke about ray tracing. I've spoken about Vivior. But just some things with Allotex on the presbyopia front. We now have a treatment which is a corneal tissue from an eye bank that can't be used for a transplant for whatever reason, that is decellularized, sterilized, and shaped by a femtosecond laser, measured by lasers to determine that our metrics are right. We've got the inlay we need. And what this has done is led to high precision, repeatable sterile lenticles for presbyopia. And these lenticles are implanted under a LASIK flap at 110 microns because they're corneal tissue. There's the risk of biocompatibility issues is to zero. We've seen nothing in the study. And it's placed just in one eye in an emmetrope centrally, just below the pupil, creates this additional power. And on a wavefront, you can see the power it gives. And on OCT, you can see what it does. These are 4 cases. You place it visually. You can't even see it afterwards. You need to do an OCT to determine where it is. And what this has led to is very good biocompatibility, completely different to the synthetic corneal inlays. It's ethically sourced. It's customizable in time. And I can't wait for this to become a product that is commercially available, because this costs the patient in their reading eye 1 line, maybe 2 lines, binocularly, no lines, gives them a huge improvement up close and gives them incredibly good functional vision with a very safe procedure on 1 eye. Clearer vision is something that's also very exciting. It's refractive surgery of the cornea, of an IOL inside the eye, and of a contact lens, but you get the change in power, not by a shape change and not by changing the thickness, but simply just by changing the refractive index of the medium that you're working on. And you can imagine if this becomes a tool that's really usable, how that increases the perception of safety and convenience, and how that can help us in our mission. Right. So myopia control, Gede, I don't want to take too much time on these things. I want to get to the college. So I'm going to skip this a bit quickly, but myopia control is something that in Asia, you're probably ahead of the curve in terms of how you're dealing with this. This is courtesy of Donald Tan. The work that you're doing there is phenomenal. And as we said earlier, it's important to reduce the amount of myopia. And people say, isn't that counterproductive? Are you not taking away your own work? And the truth is, no, we're not taking away our own work. But there's so much work we can't deal with it. All we're doing is we're making our work safer by doing a procedure for a -4 patient rather than for a -14 patient. So digitalization can improve things in many ways, as we've mentioned. Right. So it's not easy to change the world. We know that. But some things are inevitable, like electric vehicles, like the move to renewable energy. We're living longer. On a global basis, we're living longer than years before. So what about refractive surgery as a standalone ophthalmic specialty? So thanks again to the guy Kazira and the RSA, the many members there are very active who've been part of the process to make the World College of Refractive Surgery. So authentic refractive surgeons, they don't fly in, fly out. They don't do LASIK every now and then just to earn some money to go on a weekend away. They regard this as a vocation. This is what they do. This is what fulfills them. They do the preoperative workup, or they're a big part of it. They do the post-operative consults. They know what the results look like. How would we think if I, as a refractive surgeon, once in 6 months, just did a macular hole? Because I've done them before. I did a retinal fellowship many years ago. Or just had a go at a detachment. How do people see that differently? Where I'm trying to help someone who's actually got pathology, and I'm better helped than the person who doesn't have my training, at least, than having a young patient come in with a life ahead of them, with everything ahead of them, who has glasses they could be wearing, but wants to see well, so needs to have a really well done procedure. Now it's assigned to someone who does it on an ad hoc basis. That doesn't really make sense. So this is the availability heuristic. What actually happens in the world is the big picture. What's covered in the news is a very small picture. And unfortunately, nowadays, what's covered in the news, that little dot moves around depending on our channels that we watch. So what there is to know about vision correction is enormous. What our colleagues know about vision correction is quite small. So how do we go about changing the world? Well, the evolution is we're trying to get to the point where we don't need spectacles for everything. But does everyone understand the benefits? So these people do. Elite sportsmen understand it. Many of them have had it done. The military does. In fact, in the US, vision correction is offered as at no cost. It's given because it makes better pilots, better soldiers. First responders do, firefighters, policemen, they understand it. And so do these people. Refractive surgeons understand the benefits. And as a refractive surgeon, you are 5 times more likely to have refractive surgery than the population at large. 65% of refractive surgeons have had surgery already. So what are the field do you know where people have actually taken the medicine themselves? The cost benefit, the value benefit is enormous. The cost of LASIK, whatever it might be, is nothing compared to glasses and contact lenses over a lifetime. Refractive surgery in many ways has been the concept car of ophthalmology. It's out ahead, it's pushing the boundaries, it's learning how we deal with patients, it's learning how we deal with self-paying patients, how we deal with optical principles. And it's the concept car, and 10 years later, it's now in cataract surgery, in IOLs. I love the fact that Alcon, with the new Alcon, has as their tagline, see brilliantly. They're talking about the benefits of seeing well. That's what it's, that's what it's about. What about this? These teeth, or this person with an injury of the legs in calipers versus an internal fixation. How come we don't think twice for the person who is young, their teeth aren't aligned, and it's a natural right of age, of process to have your teeth fixed? We wouldn't dream of using an external solution to a problem that could be fixed internally. Yet as far as vision correction goes, many ophthalmologists would say to the patients, nah, I wouldn't do it if I were you, mainly because they don't know much about the specialty and where the specialty is today. So the day before something is a breakthrough, it's deemed to be quite crazy. So the College of Refractive Surgery is a big step, obviously. And we have a very good analogy with plastic and reconstructive surgery and cosmetic surgery. And the plastic surgeons established themselves 80 years ago. Aesthetic surgery was more recently. So it has been there before, that people have broken away, not broken away, it's not the right term, but they've formed a new, more specialized, more specific. And the moment you have a procedure that's safe, ethical, you can show this to the public by maintaining high standards for education, examination, and certification, and continuous certification. And the parallels between plastic and cosmetic surgery are quite striking. And it's a multifaceted approach. So how is refractive surgery different to general ophthalmology? So refractive surgery is performance-based. It's not disease-based. And the standards for excellence are consequentially far higher. Direct pay services are refractives in that space. And so surgeons need to be entrepreneurs and physicians and psychologists. It's rapidly evolving technology. So it's ongoing training. It doesn't stop. It's a very broad scope, and IOLs are becoming a much, much bigger part of that. And refractive surgery can only meet its potential if we have surgeons able to deliver perfect results, or as close as possible to perfect results at scale, and surgeons who know how to deal with their complications. So why should it be a separate specialty? Well, it's organized differently, and it needs its own organizational structure. There's an explosion of knowledge. It's expanding from corneal to intraocular. It's a different nature in elective medicine, and the public sphere in which our field exists. And this specialization, we believe, will greatly enhance the broader ophthalmic world. I mean, I have found it amazing over the years where how many people who are ophthalmologists not doing vision correction surgery in a social setting, if they ask what you do for a living and they say I'm an ophthalmologist, one of the first questions they get asked is, do you do LASIK? So the general public are aware of what ophthalmologists can do. They're not quite aware that many ophthalmologists are not very positive about vision correction due to lack of knowing what's happening. So ophthalmology was one of the very, very first specialties on the American boards. In 1917 was the first one to offer board certification. And to this day, still has only one specialty, and that's ophthalmology. Of course, we speak about different subspecialties, but there's only one, and that's ophthalmology. In 1979, ENT broke away from ophthalmology. The present day is, do we believe that general ophthalmology today should have any sort of concern about the adequacy of their training and the level of qualifications needed to become a specialist in refractive surgery? So I'm going to pick on my son again, unfortunately. He's a fantastic young ophthalmologist. Can he be signed off now to say, you can go and do refractive surgery? No, I think the answer is very, very obvious. All right. So physician education for refractive surgery is a massive undertaking. There are a lot of organizations that have played a very big role in doing this. Most of this isn't covered in residency, and it's not just book learning, not by a long shot. Refractive surgery continues to evolve through a lifetime. Surgeons evolve, techniques evolve, technology evolves, progresses through an array of procedures, and it's escalating at a furious rate. And keeping a pace of these needs an agile organization to keep people trained. The entrepreneur side of the business, doctors often don't like speaking about profit in the same word as, or costs in the same word as they're speaking about medicine. But the bottom line, and you can't hide from it, is that the moment you run a practice, it's a business. If you're not profitable, you're not sustainable, and then you can no longer provide the services you spent all the years training for. So it's got to be profitable to be sustainable. And the capital equipment costs are daunting. The costs can become very significant very quickly, and this can often be a barrier. So we've spoken a little bit about this. A new surgeon going into refractive faces a very steep gradient. And how can you really do that without further formal training? Patient demands, anyone in aesthetic surgery will know, patient demands. Patients can be unhappy afterwards with a 20/20 outcome, but they're still not happy. It's judged against perfection. So the rise of patient expectations, thanks to the success we've had before, is so high that it now requires a very, very special physician. And the very few specialties require greater care of the time-honored doctor-patient relationship than refractive surgery. So doing the work up to know that they're a good candidate, explaining the benefits of them without over-promising. In fact, you've got to, in some way, you've got to under-promise, yet over-deliver to keep the excitement going. So the 7 core competencies for a significant area of medicine to evolve into a medical specialty are professionalism, patient care, procedural skills, medical knowledge, practice-based learning and improvement, interpersonal and communication skills, and systems-based practice. And I can't think of another field of medicine that's more qualified to become a separate specialty than refractive surgery. Right. So I think I've said enough about that for now. I don't have to do this. Yes, just a very good, especially in today's times, I thought this made sense. While the stock market was going up, we're pretty okay, we're happy enough. It goes down a tiny bit and we're panicking. So the primary goal of disease-based ophthalmology is to avoid loss, stop the decline of cataract, blindness, glaucoma, all these things. And we have done an amazing job of that. But it's within the framework of insurance. We collectively pay insurance to share risk and prevent risk. Cataract surgeries for on average 65 and plus, glaucoma same, AMD same. The cost of falls amongst older adults, 50 billion per year, just in the USA. And these are the calls to medical insurance companies, not other falls, other insurance companies, just for the medical insurance companies, 50 billion per year. Bowley in Canada did an analysis of what would happen if every patient who received an IOL in the US, instead of getting a monofocal with varifocal glasses afterwards, got a multifocal. Of course, not every patient is suitable for multifocal. But the analysis showed that including the costs of the multifocal, there'd be a 4 billion annual saving just on the front of falls. So the benefits of refractive surgery go way beyond just the aesthetics. It's way, way, way bigger. So some of our colleagues believe that we're wasting our skills with refractive surgery, but we believe that improving the quality of life is a worthy pursuit. Refractive surgery provides improvements in life every waking minute. Benefits are seen in lifestyle, convenience, occupational fitness, personal economics, safety and appearance, and we create value, we pursue gain. So these are the 3 main categories: ocular maturity, those who are mostly in the laser vision correction group, ICL group, 45 to 60, entering the presbyopia, we need more thinking around them, and then the cataract group. And we've designed systems of how we can deal with this. It's going to take a system approach. It's not one person working on their own. The economics at the moment are overwhelmingly positive for refractive surgery, for patients and for society. We are the agents of change, and we must provide physician leadership to maintain quality. And listen to this for a comment. Refractive surgery will become the default method for vision correction. The only question is when, and it's up to us to make it when. So humanity lived with uncorrected poor vision for many, many, many centuries. but we now have the potential on a mass scale to eliminate this congenital defect. Refractive surgery currently sits inside of ophthalmology and is seen as an orphan child, not paid much attention, often ridiculed. The required state is that it sits on top of ophthalmology. You've got to be an ophthalmologist, and once you've done that, you go and become a refractive specialist. It needs the same status as a retinal specialist or a glaucoma specialist. And we want the youngest and the brightest minds, when they see the problem, to want to go into refractive surgery. So what will this take? Slowing myopia, targeting younger patients, putting systems in place, dedicated leadership. At the end of the day, it's going to take physician leadership, and that's you watching this webinar. We need physicians who are going to prepare to take up this challenge. That's where the College of Refractive Surgery comes from. The World College, it was established July last year as a B Corp in the States. Membership's about to open. We found 93 co-founders who all invested. The college is funded thanks to people putting money in. They all believe in this mission. They want to see refractive surgery. If you believe as a refractive surgeon that we've reached our potential and what we can do for humanity, the college is not for you. The college is for you if you think we're only scratching at the surface and our impact has not been seen by humanity yet. It's been seen by a few well-off people, but not by humanity. It's 39 countries. It's about curriculum and then accreditation of centers, certification, and impact, studying impact, about advocacy, about specialization, and about research. The literature that we have supporting refractive surgery, even though it's LASIK is the most studied elective procedure on earth, is still sparse. We need more. There are many areas we need more. We need more data. Our mission is to improve the human condition by preventing and eliminating refractive errors on a global basis, by positioning refractive surgery as primary care for vision correction. Our role is clear. These are the founding board of directors. Vision correction for all ages, the lifestyle benefits it brings. It makes people live a safer life, a more effective life, better social prospects, occupational fitness. The economic benefits are enormous. And it begins with myopia control. In young adults, it's about distance vision correction. And then vision correction with the drops nowadays, laser vision correction, lens-based refractive surgery for presbyopes, and then eventually cataract surgery being seen as a refractive procedure where we get people independent glasses afterwards. So, last thoughts. Machine learning, AI, the first part of the talk is all about creating the industry, the system, the ecosystem of making this safe, the way the aviation industry becomes safe. Training the pilots is what the World College of Refractive Surgery has set itself out to do. We've got a program in place to make refractive surgery practitioners be seen in the same light in terms of skill sets and reliability as a pilot. We get on a plane without even asking the captain's name. We don't need to know the captain's gender. We don't need to know. And the dream is that once you're accredited by or certified by the College of Refractive Surgeons, that anyone walking into your center knows it's akin to flying on an aircraft and knowing you arrive at your destination. So Gede, thank you very, very much for your kind attention to all of you. And thank you again for this very kind invitation.
Thank you so much. What a lecture, Arthur. Incredible presentation. That was remarkable. So, fellow ophthalmologists, now we are approaching the question and answer session. Arthur, please open the question and answer box on your Zoom. There are more than 10 questions, so you can read and answer each question. Please, Arthur.
Okay, I'm going to have a quick glass of water. Thank you so much again. And I'm sorry I had to rush it so quickly. When I went over it myself, it went a lot quicker. I got stuck in a few places. So how does AI work in power calculation? This is from an anonymous attendee. And the way AI does this, sorry, the question just gone, is it takes many more parameters into account than we normally would with biometry. Biometry has an awful number of assumptions, and the assumptions would be lens thickness, anterior chamber depth, posterior corneal. Many of these things are assumptions. I'm sorry about this printer going off. I can't control it. And what AI does is looking at outcomes, it starts bringing additional factors into play, like gender. And what time is showing us is that it's increasing the outcomes. A lot of the AI is it's the secret sauce inside these programs, and we don't have access to them or insights into them. All we know is it's giving us better results with less thinking from our side. Right. I hope that answers the question, Gede.
Yeah, maybe we can continue to the next question.
All right.
Yeah.
Where did I start? I think I'm going to start on top again. I'll just, whatever comes in on top, I'll do. So do you allow phaco fellowships with many machines, techniques, and instructors, or is it better with only one machine? So I think, yeah, that's a great question. And once you're doing a fellowship, you've got a very good training already. You're an ophthalmologist, you're just learning more. And sometimes, depending on where you've trained, it might be that you haven't had that much experience. And then it's always much better just to use one device, become really comfortable with the device. And once you're comfortable with the whole process, then you can start looking around and comparing devices. So I think that's what I'd say most. I think as far as techniques go, you need more than one technique because procedures can change on the fly. You're busy doing a capsular rhexis and the pupil starts coming down, or the patient moves at the wrong time, or you have to anticipate those things. If you're doing a capsular rhexis manually and the patient's not that cooperative, you maybe use a cystotome. And someone who's very calm and relaxed, you can use a capsular rhexis forceps. Microscopes and instructors, I think there's so many ways to do things. And it's one of the challenges we face with the College of Refractive Surgery is we don't want to tell any refractive surgeon how they need to do something that they're doing currently and they're doing successfully. But what we want to do is have standardized techniques. So if you're an airline pilot for an Airbus A340, you can't go there and fly it the way you want to. There's a manual that tells you how to use it. Of course, when you're going to fly your small plane, you can do whatever you like. But when you're flying an Airbus, you need to do it. And we need to have industry standards like that. So I think it's always very, very good to learn what the basics are. And once you're very familiar with them, then you can start seeing how other people do things and learn from them. And the beauty of ophthalmology, and especially cataract and refractive, is it's an ongoing learning process. You never stop. I don't know any one of my colleagues who remotely thinks they know everything. They're all learning. And those who know the most are those seeking learning the most. So I like your attitude, but I would learn one system first and then expand once you're very comfortable with where you are. The next question, Gede, that I have is, do you still insert multifocal lenses if there's a PC rupture? That depends on a number of things, and that would be, can you put the lens safely into the bag? And if you can, it's something you could do. If there's no vitreous loss and the anterior hyaloid is still intact, and you decide to do something like an optic capture, you just make a very small calculation difference or IL power calculation difference. The lens now will sit slightly more anteriorly, and you just reduce the power by 0.5. So you could do that. I think if it is a compromised bag and there's vitreous loss, I'd be much more inclined to do the anterior vitrectomy if that needs to be done. Put an IOL in a bag, wait for 6 weeks, and then do a multifocal add-on, a supplementary lens as a secondary procedure. Gede, do you want to discuss these things, or will I just answer them as I see them?
Yeah, this is the third question will be, how is AI going to work in robotic surgery?
Okay, so that's 1, 2 that I'm not 100%, no one knows the story quite yet. A lot of people are working on this, but in robotic surgery, so the one device I know currently, which is the most advanced along this pathway, is a device called Keranova, and it's a femtosecond cataract system that has built into the unit a phaco machine. And looking at early studies and their pilot work, it looks as though you'd need the phaco maybe 1% of the time. And what this device does, yes, part of what it does. So it's a femtosecond laser machine, like a LensX or a Catalyst or a Victus. It's got a robotic arm like ROSA, which is the brain neurosurgery device, a robotic arm that self-docks, will dock on the eye. Once it's docked, it then starts doing a very quick OCT scan of the cornea and the lens, determines all the different densities. And now, while it plans its energy to break the lens up, already knows the central part has this particular density, while the cortex has a different density. And in the very first treatment of the process, puts shots in and looks at the reaction that the tissue has to the shot and does this threshold calculation. And once it knows exactly what different areas of the lens need in terms of power, puts it in a matrix pattern. So it does it very, very quickly, breaks up a lens from a soft lens to a rock hard lens into tiny cubes that you aspirate. And it's only on the very odd occasion that you can't aspirate them with your IA that you'd use the phaco to take cubes that have stuck together maybe. So that's just one of the things where AI can do it. But AI is going to help us enormously with patient selection, with the more data that goes into the system that's good, the more we're going to learn. And the beauty about AI is we're going to learn things that we currently aren't even questioning. We're going to learn things that are going to make cataract surgery more effective and more safe.
The next question will be, AI for IOL power calculation largely depend on the data that is available. How can you ensure that the data is representative of the entire population?
Right, so you can't, but what you're doing, what you're entering into the AI platform is you entering your actual length, you're entering the parameters that you need to do the lens calculation. So the first thing is you're entering data that's been validated already. There's not one of us who does an IOL power choice on a poor signal to noise ratio outcome. You know, we want to validate the data. So we know we're putting good data in, but there are parts of the data we're missing. And that's what the Virgin's formulas are. They were just regression formulas looking at outcomes we got, and they started seeing trends in the errors we were making and just made adjustments. But AI is going to take that way further, more live, you know, on the run. It'll do it on the fly, and taking much more data into account. You know, AI today can look at a fundus photograph and with very, very close to 100% accuracy, tell you if the patient is male or female. I can't look at a fundus and tell if I'm seeing a male or a female. You know, so that's the kind of power AI has. So you can just use your imagination is where this is going to take us. It's going to just drive the system far more safely. When an airliner comes into land at an airport, the pilot sees the runway. Of course, the pilot knows how to land that plane, but he jumps onto a glide slope. There's a glide slope. There's a guidance in the air, the radio frequency driven guidance that takes the plane down. He's just going to be there to control it, he or she. So this is where it's going, in those kinds of directions where everything around us makes it a safer environment with better outcomes in the pipeline. It's evolving though. So where it's going to go, we'll see. But I saw a very good question that I might just jump into now. It's a question of what happens if something goes wrong and it was AI driven. So I think this is where the analogy to black box thinking comes in. If something goes wrong, you've got to have that black box thinking. You've got to go back and analyze each step of the way to determine where the problem was. And most times, unfortunately, if you go and look at the last 20 years of aviation, despite its incredible record, almost all of the disasters have been human error. So it's very unlikely the AI is going to be making the mistake. People don't bring systems to practice. You know, if I look at companies that give us devices that we work with, those devices are safe and they're ready by the time we use them. Most of the errors we see with laser surgery today is an incorrect error. You know, human put the error in incorrectly. Now, if you've got a closed system that's got everything integrated on the same loop, you're not going to make those errors.
Okay, the next question will be, whose fault is it if the AI goes wrong? How will you deal with the complication?
All right, that's the one I just sort of addressed. But if it goes wrong, you'd have to do an analysis to see where the problem came from. And, you know, as we do with all new devices, if you've ever been in a situation where you're the first one that you know to use a device, you don't go out doing 100 cases as quickly as you can. You do one case and you give it some time to see how it turned out. All right, then you do more. And it's a process of learning. And fortunately, all the companies in ophthalmology are very responsible, and they have advisory boards, they have great research departments, and they make sure that the process, as far as they can tell, is as safe as possible as can be before it goes out to their beta site group, their core group. They're going to first test it for them. They'll learn from that. By the time it becomes a product that is commercially available, it tends to be a very, very, very safe, very safe product.
All right. The next question: could we improve the AI to help us in making posterior capsule away from our tip during PECO? Thank you in advance for your answer, Professor.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I don't know exactly what the answer is there, but one of them would be the likes of Caranova and the other devices thinking that same way. Is if you can not have a uniform amount of energy being delivered into the eye, but it can be striated or not titrated to the tissue that you're dealing with, that'll be a good start. There might be ways in the future where all you need to do is remove the nucleus, and there'll be an easy way to remove the cortex and what's left behind. So this is an area that's evolving all the time, but it's reassuring to see how people are still concerned about breaking capsules, and that's the safety element. And it shows you why safety is such an important analogy to have for us. Until we all are really comfortable with the fact that we have a very, very safe procedure, whether it's a vision correction procedure or some other procedure, it's difficult to convey that same trust to patients.
Okay. The next question: are the benefits of refractive surgery worth the risks, especially for those who have high visual demand?
Sorry, Gede, just say that again.
Are the benefits of refractive surgery worth the risks, especially for those who have high visual demand?
Absolutely. If you go back to the slide, I know I went through it quickly, but the slide on who sees the benefits currently, 65% of refractive surgeons have had LASIK done. I've had it done. My wife's had it done. Both my sons have had it done, including the ophthalmologist. Ophthalmologists have it done more than anyone else. Those who need no invitation to have it done are firefighters, policemen, soldiers, people whose lives depend on their vision. It's very difficult to find a bigger endorsement for refractive surgery than that. Then someone whose life depends on their vision will opt for refractive surgery. What's the alternative? The alternative is not seeing at all, going uncorrected, and that's not a great alternative today. The other is a contact lens. Well, contact lenses today have a higher risk than laser refractive surgery does in terms of infection, in terms of dryness. What about IOLs? IOLs have a very, very good, sorry, not IOLs, glasses. Your glasses are pretty safe while they're on your face. But if you're driving down the highway and your 5-year-old is playing the fool and takes your glasses off, suddenly it's not so safe. So the moment you lose your glasses, you're not safe. You're sleeping in your bed at 4 in the morning, and either your baby's screaming or you think there's a burglar in the house, and you can't find your glasses, they're not that safe anymore. Waking up in the morning, being able to see, that's a different level of safety. So I think the benefits of refractive surgery are absolutely enormous. And today, the risks have become so low, especially when you're seeing someone who is a refractive surgeon, who is not selling technology to you, who's not differentiating on technology, someone who has a reputation of getting great results. That's the person you go and see. And all they need to do is they'll make the best decision for you, and they'll tell you why. And you always look at the risk-benefit ratio and you look at the cost-benefit ratio. And that whole proposition of cost-benefit ratio and risk-benefit ratio has never been better for refractive surgery than it is now. And I challenge you to tell me what other part of medicine has a better risk-benefit ratio than cataract and refractive surgery today.
Thank you, Professor. There are 4 more questions. Would you advise corneal training and fellowship as a requirement before doing a fellowship in refractive surgery?
So, you know, the College of Refractive Surgery now that has established itself, there are a few fellowships going on at the moment through the RSA, and all they require is being an ophthalmologist. You need to be an ophthalmologist. Of course, someone who comes into a refractive fellowship, having already done a corneal fellowship, is in an even better place, you know, is better educated and is better trained to deal with, from a basic point of view, to deal with refractive surgery complications. But a refractive surgery fellowship that's worth its weight is going to give you all the training you need to deal with the complications you're going to get. When a patient walks into our offices, the ability to give them a good result has become quite ubiquitous. A lot of people can do that because of the way we've been trained and because of the tools we have. But when the patient gets a poor outcome, that's where it starts becoming very sparse. Who can help? And we need to get to a point where we can manage our own complications. And the moment we can manage our own complications, the perception of the safety of refractive surgery just goes up. Can you imagine every time someone has a complication, referring them to a center, a tertiary center to deal with it? And then it just seems like something went wrong. So I think being corneal trained can only be an asset, no question, but I don't think it's a prerequisite.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor. The next question will be, according to you, Professor, when can we judge that this AI system is wrong or cannot be used in our daily practice?
I think a very good, it's worked for me, so I don't know how good it is, but it's worked well for me. I've very seldomly been the first person to do the thing. I've once or twice been the first person to do something, but I've most often been a step behind those that are pioneering it. So they pioneer it, they put it in place, they do all the hard work to make it safe and to make it effective. Then you get a second group who look at it critically. And that's a group I fit into quite nicely. It fits my personality quite well. And then you get a group of early adopters. And by the time it gets to that stage, so much thought and effort and energy and cost has gone into making sure the system is working that you can rest assured the device is going to work or the system's going to work. And if you do find there's an error and you go back and you do a black box analysis, you're going to find, right, so it wasn't really the device that picked it up wrong. It was my entry point. I put in the wrong axial length. Now, what AI will do in future, and already does with axial length measurements, it will warn you and say, the two axial lengths are quite different. Make sure you put them in, you put them in correctly. The corneas are quite different. Why is that? Hasn't one eye maybe had a surgery before? So there's so many things we think about when we're trying to assess just the refractive patient, for argument's sake, for presbyopia. What's the corneal steepness? What's the projected steepness going to be after the procedure? What's the thickness? What's the state of dry eye? What's the anterior chamber depth? What's the state of the lens? What's ocular scatter like? What's the health of the retina? What's the peripheral retina look like? What's the patient want? What are their needs? There's so many things we're doing, and that's why at the end of the day, your head's bursting. But if you think about it, there are only a certain number of outcomes. There are only a certain number of procedures we do. There are only a certain number of permutations. And all AI would do for us there is analyze and use the data to make those decisions more streamlined for us. And at the end of it, show us why. Think of Vivior. Think about the challenge of choosing a multifocal lens for a patient to meet their demands based on, so tell me again, how do you spend your day? Oh, you're on a computer. Yeah, how much? Is it a laptop? Is it this? And making an assumption. So that's the power of AI, that it's going to be able to drive those things and help us see where things are going. And AI is only based on the information that it receives. It keeps on learning. So I would start off slowly. I do the first few cases with AI information, look at the outcomes compared to what you normally get. If you start seeing, yeah, this is looking good, more of your colleagues are saying it's looking good, you're starting more and more and more. And I think eventually we'll find that AI is going to drive all of our decisions and all of our cases, especially the most difficult ones.
Thank you so much, Professor. The next question will be from Dr. Ramani Chandrasekara here from United Kingdom, the vet ophthalmologist. Very interesting. Sir, do you think AI can bridge the gap of subjective assessment by the patient, which I always face as veterinary ophthalmologist? Our patient will be benefit to the next level. Thank you.
So that is fascinating.
Yeah.
So this colleague is a veterinary ophthalmologist. Is that right?
Yes, you're right.
Right. Yeah. Look, I guess it's got its challenges and its upside. If you do a procedure that's not exactly what the animal wanted, is you won't really know they didn't want it. So you're in a particularly difficult situation. It's very difficult knowing exactly what to do in terms of a visual outcome, but it's also more difficult getting feedback to change your decision. Although you'll see from the animal's behavior, I guess. But I do think it's going to help. If you just look at things like You know, Mikajaki have the company that have this robotic system of all the devices that switch in front of you and that does it automatically for you. But what they did is they put a chatbot together that you could answer from a history point of view. And they found of the 100 and something conditions they have at the moment on that chatbot, that a big percentage of them had a 100% success rate of getting the right diagnosis based just on the history. And that's something that you're missing in veterinary, obviously. So it's a very big part of human medicine. So I would think anything that you could get that helps you determine the behavior. So it would be quite interesting, some kind of contraption like Vivio that you're putting on the animal's head, and you get data from them to see how they use their vision, how they behave, what their head is doing, how they react to different lighting situations. Those kinds of things are going to help you figure out what the best solutions are. At the moment, you're making those calls anyway, and you're making them with the data that you have, not from a communication, because they're not communicating with you, but from just your insights and your experience. But at some point, if you can get more data, just more data added to the decision-making process that ultimately must help. And as we learn more about that data and it gets put into the algorithm, you'll suddenly start finding that it might be a fantastic way to assess the animal's needs is with some external device measuring the visual behavior.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor. Maybe the last question from Italy, Dr. Corrado Balasso. It will be worthy to consider the corneal spherical aberration as a parameter to improve the outcome of IOL calculation by AI?
I think so. I think that's a really good question. So one of the frequent topics on the RSA forum, it comes up frequently, is exactly spherical aberration of the IOL in context of the corneal spherical aberration. And it's interesting how many very, very experienced surgeons are sort of saying it doesn't make all that much difference. But I think there are others who feel equally strong that if you can match that better, it makes more sense. And of course, AI will help with that. It's just got all the data. So AI will have the data of the cornea, it'll have the spherical aberration from your wavefront, it will have the spherical aberration of the lenses that you're going to potentially use, and it'll do all those calculations for you and say to you, this is the lens to use. Can you imagine if today you had to manually go and calculate the lens power every time? You had to do an independent measurement of actual length, an independent measurement of, and then you can use a formula. Already we don't question the biometers. They do everything in one go. They put it out there with different formulas, different lenses, different IOL choices, and we don't question that. And that's not using AI. That's just using formulas. And I think the moment you start adding AI to it, we're going to learn, and we're going to become more and more specific. And at the end of the day, it was one of the first things I said is part of the benefits of digitalization and using data is that we can personalize the outcome. I think people have long realized that a one size fits all in so many ways isn't the best experience for the patient, or the patient paying for the service.
Wow, that's so exceptional. Many great questions have been answered by our Super Maestro at this very moment. Great speaker, great audience, so phenomenal. You all rock. And now we are arrived at the end of this webinar. Here we are spreading love, care, peace, and tranquility on earth. Thank you, SMEC Group. Thank you, Gede, Perdami Sumut, Anak Sudarti Foundation Indonesia. Thank you, all committee. Thank you, our distinguished participants. And to our maestro today, Dr. Arthur Cummings. Thank you so much. Please send our regard to your family. Thank you so much, Arthur.
I will do that, Gede. Thank you once again for your very kind invitation. It's an amazing honor. Thank you so much for those who participated and sent questions and listened in. I want to reiterate that I'm an ophthalmologist first and foremost, and AI is a new space to me like it is for everyone else. There are people who know an awful lot more than I do about it. And many of them are ophthalmologists. Piers Keen from Moorfields, Rania Habash at Bascom Palmer. There are a number of people who know an awful lot. And I think what I really liked about this lecture and the invitation that you sent was putting those two topics together and thinking how they really blend. And it makes you think more. And it makes you think more and more and more that the final success and benefits we give to patients is coming from not just what we do. We're part of the machinery, but it's all the scientists, all the manufacturers, everyone who plays a role in making this work. And it's just it's an amazing space to be in for now. And as you heard, we've got a lot of work to do. So we better get back to it.
Thank you so much, Arthur. Awesome.
Many thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And our distinguished participant, see you all soon next month at our 19th episode of 1 Hour with the Maestro webinar series. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. You are awesome. Thank you so much.